Welcome back to the Copywriters Podcast with your host, the world's greatest copywriting coach, David Garfinkel. David, how are you doing today, man?
I'm good, Nathan. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And looking over the show notes, I'm excited for today's episode. So I'm going to stop right there, hand it over to you, and play a fly on the wall.
All right. So we got a lot to cover. Jump right in. Question: how do you put together a 7, 8, or even 9-figure promotion? And just in case this wasn't clear, 9 figures means north of $100 million. And yes, you're about to meet someone who has written a promotion that took in more than $100 million. But in fact, there are very few copywriters who have done all this and will tell you how. However, our special guest today is one of the few who can and will, and he's Henry Bingaman. There are precious few copywriters who have done all of this, but Henry's one of them. All told, his copy has generated well over $300 million. He's written blockbusters for Newsmax, Natural Health Sherpa, Money Map Press, as well as other top publishers. And just as important to me, Henry is both trusted and feared by those at the top. I can't think of a better way to demonstrate trust than by what top copywriter Marcella Allison said. I practically have Henry Bingaman on speed dial. Seriously. Whenever I'm faced with a difficult choice or a major business or career decision, he's the first person I reach out to. And as far as the fear I was talking about, it's the right kind. It's the kind you want to have as a copywriter. The legendary late Clayton Makepeace said, Henry is on the short list of copywriters I would never dream of going up against. He really is that good. So now you know a little bit about Henry, but what you're going to hear today is about his awesome 7 stories method for writing powerful, long-lasting, chart-topping sales letters and VSLs. Just as soon as we cover this increasingly important reminder, copy is powerful. You're responsible for how you use what you hear on this podcast, and most of the time, common sense is all you need. But if you make extreme claims or if you're writing offers for products in highly regulated industries like health, finance, business opportunity, you may want to get a legal review after you write and before you start using your copy. My larger clients do this all the time. So, Henry, welcome, and thanks for making time to see us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, David. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, I was on Henry's podcast a couple weeks ago, and we had a blast with that too. So it is great to see you again. So you've got the 7 story method, but what you really call them are story blocks, right? Could you explain the concept of story blocks?
Yeah, I think of it, the metaphor that works the best for me is like bricks and mortar. So I build all these bricks out before I start writing a promo. You got to get your building supplies together, right? Because writing a promo is more like constructing a promo, the way I see it. So all these individual stories are individual bricks that I'm going to use to put together to create the promo at the end. And then in between is all the mortar. So all the transitions, all the ideas that go into sewing these ideas together to really make the promo in the shape that you need it to be. So it's the story blocks. I consider them blocks because, again, you're building that brick. And it is its own self-contained little unit. Like that is the core strength of it. But none of it works if you don't sew it all together with the mortar and to get the shape you want. Does that make sense?
It does. It's perfect. I thought it was something like that, but that makes it crystal clear now. Before we jump in, the other thing is a story block might actually contain more than one, what I call micro story, but it is a cohesive unit that does something specific in your copy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, sometimes you end up breaking the bricks apart, right? Like you might have something, like you might build a brick and then have to break it apart and put it together in different ways later. So there are different stories in it, but I mean, you can get down to the micro level of each fiber, each sentence. But at the end of the day, it's just so much easier for me to think of it in bricks. Like if I did a promo for another Agora division recently. and they were on a tight deadline. So they needed it written into legal in under a month, which, normally I take 3 months to write one of these big hour-long VSLs video things. The only way I was able to do it is by going through, like, making a sprint and writing all the core stories in my 7 stories framework out into like just those rough bricks. And then there was some shaping and stuff that went into getting it all together. But I don't think I could have done it in a month if I didn't have just the basic framework of like, all right, here are the core stories that I know I need in here. And if I can get these together, then I know I can get the promo done in time.
Right, because each one of these serves a specific purpose in getting the person who's watching the video or reading the story to get to the point you want them to get to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You need, I mean, the core bricks they're like essential building blocks to any promotion. So I'll give you the backstory. I was mentoring under Jed Canty at the time. So I'd started under Mark Ford it was one of the spinoffs when ETR broke up. So he was the first real copy mentor I had. And he was kind of, I don't know, mentoring by abuse. You come in, you give him copy, and he tears it apart as hard as he possibly can. And then you feel silly, and then you come back and do it again and again until finally you get well, this isn't bad. And by the time you get a Mark Ford's, this isn't bad, you've got a home run on your hands. So that was the first thing I learned. And then I went to mentor with Jed Canty, who's done well over $1 billion in sales. He was the guy that he built Newsmax from $1 million to $100 million. Then he went to Money Map Press in Agora. And I think he got them from 30 million when we got there to they cleared 300 million one year, mostly because of the copy and the processes Jed put in place. So like a legend. And he had the same type of mentoring style as Mark Ford, who was his original mentor. And it's just, it's hard in critiques until you get it right. So I was trying to figure out how to get it right so I wouldn't have to put up with as much of the abuse. So what I did is I took all of his most successful sales letters and I broke them down into just the core elements. And it was breaking down 10 or so of his sales letters and a couple other really good copywriters out there, the Mike Palmers of the world, people like that I came up with the original blocks, the original story blocks. So it's evolved a little bit since then. That was probably 10 years ago that I had the first framework for that. And at one point I got this thing up to like 16 stories. And then I realized I was just overcomplicating it. And there really are, you can overthink anything, but there really are just the 7 or 8 maybe blocks that matter in every single promotion. And then there's other bricks you can add in that might help, might not help in certain circumstances. But these are the ones I've found that are core to pretty much every single successful promotion.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the backstory. I knew half of that part. I knew a little bit about Mark Ford, not much about Jed Canty, but I didn't know. I love the fact that you analyzed stuff that worked and you said, there's a system, there's a rhythm here, there's an underlying structure. So let's get into it. What's the first one?
Yeah, the first story is the paradigm shift, which is I think of it, people like to have, I need a big idea. I need this something to open up the promo that's going to shock people. It doesn't have to be shocking. It just has to change their perspective of the world or their potential perspective of the world from it used to be with this way. And now I've learned something that maybe the world is different than I thought. So it's literally shifting a paradigm. One of the best examples I can give people is I did it's actually, I think still holds the Agora's record for biggest front end sales in one day. So we did over 10,000 sales of the launch of the John Boehner promotion, which was it launched Money Map Press's National Institute for Cannabis Investors. So
you can hear Nathan's ears perking up as you say that because he has a few clients in that industry. Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, that's fine. I got really into the cannabis industry. I have a couple private investments in dispensaries and grows. So I'm right there with you. But this was back in 2017, I think we launched that promotion. And, the investing world is still mostly, older, conservative leaning men. So they didn't feel like they grew up in the 60s and the craze where reefer madness and this was all a terrible thing. And, it's a gateway drug. You take one puff, you're going to be on the street as a heroin addict in 3 days. Right. So there was a lot of resistance to investing in cannabis stocks, which had just started being listed. So what we did was we got a conservative Republican, he used to be Speaker of the House, John Boehner, and he had retired from Congress and he was now on the board of a cannabis company. So we got him to come in and basically give the green light to conservative investors saying, no, look, there's medical applications here. This is not, there's tax revenue to be had that could save, that's funding public schools. Like there's good things involved in the cannabis industry. And that really turned people around. And I mean, that promotion obviously did gangbusters, and it ran for, 9 months, which is a long time for a financial promotion to run. Brought in, I forget, many, many thousands and thousands of new customers for Agora, which built that division into, I think, a $40 million a year at one point for the Cannabis Institute.
That's awesome. Okay, so paradigm shift. Yeah, and that's great. Never heard anyone talk about starting things that way, but you've got to do that. You got to show them, yeah, things are different now, so pay attention. I love that. What's the second one?
The second one's, it's the basic hero story. So this is, you talk about this in your book, The Persuasion Story Code, right? It's basically origin stories. So there's a number of different origin stories, but if you're going to be selling something, the person that's doing the selling has to be in some way a hero. Like they can't just be your normal schlub off the street, right? They have to be admirable in some way. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. You cover, I forget how many different types of origin stories in your book, but you can use any one of them for the hero story. It just has to actually make them into a hero. So, I mean, there's a couple different types of heroes you can be too. There's this is one of yours. Like it didn't exist, so I invented it myself, right? That's the kind of the guy that builds a thing from the ground up, and he's just your everyday guy, and he's the one you want to emulate. There's the, God among men hero story, which is just like, I have such amazing natural elite abilities that you can't compete with me. I'm going to leave all the competition behind. So think Porter Stansberry, if you know any financial people, he has this, like, I'm a god among men. And it can be really grating to some people, but it also really works in certain circumstances. It's like, yeah, if I'm getting stock picks, I want somebody to be omniscient who's making those stock picks. And then there's kind of the, I call it like the priest hero story. You're not the god, but if you go back religions before Protestant Christianity, basically, there was always an intermediary between the gods and the normal people. So if you can position yourself as the, I have access to the gods and I'm bringing that to you, that's another way you can build up your hero story.
Sort of like the co-host of Copywriters podcast or something like that. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. And from there, this one has the word shock in it. I like it. Number 3. You want to tell us about that?
Oh, sure. It's the shocking discovery. And this is so if the paradigm shift is the world was this way before and now it's this way, there has to be a moment, a flash of brilliance or realization that gets you to that paradigm shift. Like, how did the hero of this promo discover this paradigm shift was happening? So with John Boehner, it was, I think he had a story about, he was at a conference and this wounded Navy SEAL veteran came up to him and said, look, I know, Congressman, you oppose cannabis, but I want you to know I had a brain injury while I was defending our country. I was too close to an IED that went off. I had endless pain. Nothing worked. I started taking this cannabis and CBD, and it's the only thing that's given me my life back. So you have this, like, the John Boehner in that example goes, well, I love veterans. Like, he's a Republican, so defending the country is one of his highest values. And then to abandon a veteran to when all the other medication wouldn't work and this thing does, he kind of had to change it. And you can see it's a natural thing that he had to change his mind based on the facts on the ground. So that's the shocking discovery. It's something that, like, shocks you out of the current paradigm into the new one.
I love the emotion in that, but I also love structurally how the shocking discovery, number 3, ties together number 1 and number 2. So you've got a synthesis in the development. I love that. What happens from there? What's the next one?
So the next one is it's a cheat story block, because it encompasses a number of different types of stories. I call these escalations. So the point is that you're escalating to the inevitable conclusion that the person needs to buy this product. So what are all the stories in there? There can be individual origin stories. Like, there could be a scientist. If you're doing something medical, it could be how the scientist discovered this one element of it. It can be testimonial type stories. Like, here's what it accomplished. I think a lot of my I did a promotion on virtual reality. So this was we were promoting Nvidia's stock when it was $7, which I don't know if anybody follows the stock market. Nvidia's at like 300 and some right now. So it was a really good stock pick by Michael Robinson, the expert. But the application I chose to really sell it was this virtual reality application that was coming up. Remember, this is 2016, so people didn't have the same kind of reactions to virtual reality as they do now. But I just went through and used every different application of it was the GPU processor that NVIDIA was selling. So the first one was virtual reality, which was like actually healing people's pain. There was the story I opened with was a soldier who got all these 3rd-degree burns, and the only way he could tolerate the pain was with this virtual reality game while they were scrubbing his scabs off. So kind of a crazy story. But from there, I go to the childhood cancer. It's distracting kids while they're getting their chemotherapy. And then you go to self-driving cars, and then you go to, like, you just keep escalating up, and you see, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, and here are the 25 companies that are buying this GPU from this mysterious company, and it's Microsoft and Google and Amazon. And so you just build and build and build until people are like, I have to get this thing. So those are the escalations. It's a million different types of stories, but it's all building, building, building.
Okay, so for the first time, I see a crossover between your copy 7 stories and music or cinema fiction. In other words, Escalation is like the crescendo. It's like the end of Act 2, where the tension and the excitement rise right before you get to something. I love that. So what's next? What's after the escalation?
So not necessarily in order. The next one that I almost didn't include this in the 7. It comes in and out. Like sometimes I consider this an escalation, but it's in almost every single successful sales letter. So I call it the forgiveness of sins story. So you have to give people a reason why they're not dumb for not knowing about this before, right? Especially if you're doing like a medical thing. It's if you're selling natural therapy, you have to tell them why they were mistaken to not go with this before, like why you got duped basically into going with the traditional medical system. Or if it's a stock, why the Wall Street doesn't want you to know about this. It can't be their fault. That you just don't want to make your customer feel dumb. People don't buy when they're feeling embarrassed or feeling dumb. So you need a plausible reason in there why they couldn't have known about this. Or if they had heard about this, it was reasonable for them to dismiss it because of XYZ reason. This is especially true in weight loss. So that the $100 million promotion that you mentioned, it's actually $144 million in sales over 7 years. It was a weight loss promotion. And most of the sales letter was specifically focused at women. And it was telling them why everything they tried in the past couldn't have possibly worked because it was designed for men and it wasn't designed for their hormonal fluctuations. And like all these different things they could never have known about because this entire industry is geared towards male fitness. And so by taking this female first approach, they could have all these amazing results. And obviously that thing did really well over a long time.
$140 million. Yeah, I'd say pretty well. Oh, Nathan has arrived. Yes, sir.
I know that you've given me a couple chances to jump in. This one particularly, though, I want to ask you, giving the potential buyer an enemy, a villain to blame, rather than blaming themselves for being dumb, giving them, say, oh, it's the pharmaceutical industry, or it's the corn subsidies, or it's those evil greedy capitalists, or whatever it is, giving them somebody else to blame for why they have failed in the past. I wanted to get your thoughts on that before we moved on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a large part of the forgiveness of sins. That's often a huge thing, is you've been lied to. There is this enemy. But I also like to include that in escalation sometimes, so it can have a crossover where it's because the enemies, like say, big ag. You can make Monsanto into the enemy of a lot of things, and they've suppressed this information, but they've also created this opportunity by doing this thing. So enemies can be useful in a lot of different ways, which is why it's kind of a crossover concept. It's not just in forgiveness of sins, although it obviously can be a great, in that weight loss thing, it was all the male-focused trainers. This is why the women haven't been getting results and have been getting frustrated and breaking down crying because they're being abused, basically, because they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole with male fitness for females. So yeah, the enemies can be very, very powerful.
You mentioned the cannabis industry. Big Ag and Monsanto are like the go-to enemies for that industry.
Yeah.
We've still got 2 more, right? Last one was forgiveness of sins. Now, I know you said the last 3 can be mixed up in different orders, but what's the next one you want to talk about?
Yeah, the next one that you need in everything is a mission statement. It's why are you bringing this to them? Like, what is your bigger you don't want to be, hey, I have a program to sell, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just here to sell you. You need to have some bigger mission. I have my own products, and my bigger mission is like, I want to increase liberty in the world. I want to increase freedom and independence among people. So I have, my Breaking Free freelancing course. I have a new course I'm coming out with called the X Plan, which is about getting some of your assets overseas. And all of this is my bigger mission is like, I see, since 2020, I've seen tyranny increasing in the world, and I want to, alleviate that in individuals' lives. A lot of these financial guys that I work with, theirs is just like, hey, the system Wall Street's been screwing you. Here's how you can get back. Like, I saw all this from the inside. It's such an ugly industry that I want to give the little guy power. In health, it's often the same thing. It's like, I see so much pain in the world, and I my mission in life is to alleviate pain for myself. Started with myself or my family, and now I'm bringing it to everybody. So that mission statement is super important. It has to have a reason why you're doing this that is not purely, because I want to make money from you. And it has to be real in some way. You can't fake a mission statement. People can feel it. If it's not really what that guy believes, I mean, you can fake it so far, but the best ones are always the most genuine, there's a real story behind it.
Yeah, it sort of resonates with people at a feeling level, I read this morning that in the Tibetan way of looking at things, the brain is about the body, the throat is about the voice, but the mind is in the heart. That's an interesting way of looking at things, isn't it? Yeah. Especially for a copywriter. And finally, the $100,000 pitch.
It's the $100,000 pitch. This is something when I was working with Jed Canty a lot, which I'm working with him again recently. But this was like, because we both do angel investing, and so our idea was like, all right, what do you have to say to somebody to get them to invest $100,000 in this thing? And obviously, with most things we're doing, they're not actually investing $100,000, but increasing the stakes of the sales pitch and just imagining that somebody's going to be putting something that valuable, like they're going to be going super heavily at whatever your product could be, $29, it could be $1,000, but it has to feel like you're selling $100,000 product. So what is the sales pitch that would get you to invest such a huge amount in this thing? Like, what is the most persuasive case you can come up with? So that's why we called it the $100,000 pitch, because we've, if I'm going to invest $100,000 in a startup or a company, it's like, I'm going to have to eliminate every objection. I'm going to have to know you're there with me. I'm going to have to understand everything going on. Nothing left to chance. So it's just basically a way of saying this is the most persuasive pitch I can possibly make.
Yeah, I like that. And I think this solves a problem Nathan and I have talked about, and Carlton talks about, the problem of selling on your heels or hesitating to get 100 totally behind it. If you're going for $100,000, you've got to clear all of those doubts and like I'm doing, stumbling, bumbling, stuttering out of the way. Yeah, that's awesome. Let me just review your list in 1 minute, and then I think you have a special offer, a free offer for our listeners. 1, paradigm shift. 2, hero story. 3, shocking discovery. 4, escalations. 5, forgiveness of sins. 6, mission statement. And 7, the $100,000 pitch. Yeah,
that's right.
So what do you got for us? Oh, Nathan, you got something.
Yeah, before we let the listeners know the free gift that you have for them, I just wanted to say, we didn't explicitly say it in this episode, but a lot of what this is, yes, there's the buildup, there's the tension, there's the kind of like the flow of how things need to go, but there's a very strategic, how do I make them believe what they need to believe to say yes? And that's something that Joe Schriefer is very adamant about as well, is through the copy, there's certain things that they believe right now that's preventing them from buying. And I need to use my copy to go through and reframe things so that they believe what they need to believe in order to say yes. And this takes it, the way that it's layered, the paradigm shift, and then the escalation of different things, it does that so perfectly, and it does it in a natural flow. I have just loved this episode, and I super appreciate you coming on and sharing this with our listeners. And I wanted to emphasize that point because it didn't really get covered, but it's so important.
Yeah, thank you. My friend Will Green, who's another great copywriter. I worked with him for some years at Money Map Press. He calls copywriting the scripted transfer of belief, and I love that definition because you
I
are
love that.
transferring your belief onto the viewer. And so props to Will Green for that thought. But yes, you're right, and that is what I'm trying to do with this structure, is help that process along.
Nice. Okay, so
Excellent.
David mentioned that you have something for our listeners if they wanted to check it out.
Yeah, David mentioned I was friends with the late Clayton Makepeace. I've done a couple speaking events with him between 2015 and 2019. Unfortunately, as you guys know, he passed away in 2020, which was super sad because I was just like really starting to get to know him pretty well. But I did get to speak at his last live event. It was the $5,000 financial copywriting summit, but a lot of the lessons are applicable. And he had me do a talk on how to come up with a big idea. So it's actually one of my most popular talks ever. And I'm giving that talk away. I got permission from the people that recorded it that I could share it. So if you go to henrybing.co/idea, you can just opt in and you'll get to watch that entire talk, which was, again, it's coming up with a big idea. And there's a fancy title, but it's really just a Socratic method for coming up with a big idea that really resonates and drills into that paradigm shift.
Nice. All right. So
Awesome.
henrybing.co/idea is where you can get that. We'll make sure to have that in the show notes over at copywriterspodcast.com, as well as a whole bunch of other episodes. Not very many of them as good as this one, though. This was a fantastic episode. Henry, thank you so much for coming on. Anything else before we're out of here?
No, just thank you, Henry, for sharing this. I believe Agora, somebody paid you big bucks for the same information, and so I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
All right. So copywriterspodcast.com. You can check out the show notes, get the link to the free gift that Henry has given away. And until next time, we will catch you later.
Catch you later.